What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode with this $50 Volvo 740 project. In this one, we're gonna do some much needed transmission oil fluid change. The rear axle is going to get a fluid change, and I'm just gonna empty out and fill up the power steering fluid in this car. And just before we get started, I just want to give a huge shout out to lmr.se for sponsoring this video. It's a great website that has a ton of Volvo spare parts and just miscellaneous parts, but not just for Volvos. They have a ton of other makes and models there, and I think they also ship internationally, which is great. So yeah, let's get to it. And I got you guys a discount code from this company that you can read about in the description and the first comment. Okay guys, so the best tip I can give you when you're about to do a fluid change on a transmission or rear axle or anything like that with a fill plug and a drain plug is to always loosen the fill plug first, because the last thing you want is you removed all the fluid in the transmission and you can't refill it. That's a pretty bad day. So always make sure you remove the fill plug first. Actually, this one was pretty stuck before, so I have replaced the plug right here, as you can see, with a brand new one because the old one was super stuck. So at least we can remove the old one now. So let's go ahead and do it. And this one is a 13 millimeter on this M47 transmission. You see, loosened up with relative ease. Actually comes out a little bit from the fill plug. This is the fill plug. As a matter of fact, let's reinstall the fill plug so that it doesn't drip drop all the time. And just remove the drain plug. There's actually a fair amount of debris and metal particles on the drain plug, which is magnetic, by the way. Nothing too alarming. I guess it's an old transmission with 320,000 kilometers on the clock. But yeah, I think it's a very good decision that we are changing the transmission fluid right now. Now, even though these plugs are magnetic, they're still pretty easy to clean up with just a regular shop rag or something like that. Now, preferably you should be using aluminium washers when dealing with an aluminium casing of the gearbox to avoid galvanic currents, but I only had copper washers, so that's what I used, and those are usually fine anyways. This is the transmission fluid I'm going to be using right here, Redline's MT90, which is a GL4 transmission fluid. Now, back in the days, Volvo actually recommended an automatic gearbox fluid, but they changed that recommendation to a GL4 manual transmission fluid. And to fill up the transmission, I'm using this oil suction pump right here, which I highly recommend if you're doing a transmission fluid change. It saves you a lot of time and hassle. You just suck up the new fluid into the pump right here, and then you just pump it in through the fill plug on the transmission. I ended up emptying and refilling this suction pump about 2 times, and I ended up putting in around 1.6 liters of new fluid, which is right on par with the manual. But there's really no need to measure beforehand the amount of oil you're going to be putting in, because you just fill until it starts to drop out of the fill hole. But make sure you look up how much the gearbox can take in the first place, so you don't buy too little gearbox oil. I couldn't find the torque specs on these plugs, but usually they're around 30 to 40 Newton meters. That seems to be pretty standard on a lot of makes and models. I'm not using a torque wrench here, but if you've done enough of these, you get a feel of how tight they should be. But as I said, around 30-40 Newton meters, something like that, is usually pretty normal. And for the rear axle, I'm using this 75W90 gear oil, which is a GL5 hypoid rear axle oil, suitable for this car. You can use that particular oil on both limited slip differentials and open differentials like this one. And there I pointed out the fill and drain plug. They were both pretty dirty, so I took some degreaser on a rag and wiped them clean. The same thing here, of course, you loosen the fill plug first, which is done with a 17mm key right there, and the drain plug is 13mm. Now actually the differential fluid didn't look too bad. It's not a bad idea to replace it anyways. Now actually, when I removed the drain plug, I noticed that there weren't any washer on the plug itself. So I looked up on the differential casing and it had stuck to the mating surface right there. So I had to pry that off. So keep that in mind if you don't find any washer on the plug. And the fill plug right here, I'm putting some RTV on the threads to help along with the sealing. And always make sure you wipe all the surfaces clean where the plug goes before you tighten them down. Now I really don't know why they use different sizes on the fill and drain plug, but that's just how it is with these old Volvos. And to flush out any old GL4 fluid in the old oil suction pump right there, I'm just filling it with a little bit of new fluid and gurgling it around and emptying it. And then I fill it up with the GL5 fluid. The rear axle takes 1.6 liter, this one as well. So just fill it up until it starts to drip out, then refit the fill plug. Really feels nice now to have some fresh blood in the driveline, so you can have some peace of mind. And no brake clean here, this is free rust proofing. So on to the power steering fluid. I remove the intake tubing right there, and this is a great opportunity to inspect it for cracks as well as give it a quick clean. And then I remove the bracket for the power steering reservoir, which is held on by two 10mm bolts, and just set that to the side. Now if you want to do a complete flush, you should repeat this process that I'm doing a couple of times.
to make sure that you have fresh fluid in the whole system. But I'm just gonna do a drain and fill right here. That's definitely better than nothing, and as you're gonna see later, it actually made a big difference. So I'm just loosening the bottom hose right there and emptying it into a container that I made out of the gearbox fluid container right there that I cut the top off. And then I turn the wheels lock to lock right now to push out any extra fluid. Now you could also start the car for a couple of seconds to pressurize the system and empty out more fluid that way, but I'm not gonna do it right here. I don't want to risk the container falling off and spilling old fluid all over my garage floor. The old fluid looked really nasty, so it was a good time to replace with some new ATF fluid. That's what the Volvo manual recommends for the power steering fluid. It just says ATF fluid, nothing more. So I guess any ATF fluid would do. The ATF fluid I'm using right here is Redline's D4. I've used this one before and I had great luck with it. And right here I'm just filling to the max mark on the dipstick right there, because we're gonna do a bleed procedure later, which I'm starting with right here. I'm just turning it lock to lock, but we're also gonna do a bleed procedure when the car is on the ground, which I'm gonna talk about later. And before we put it on the ground, let's go ahead and put the summer wheels on, because it's that time of year right now. And with the summer wheels, that means the shiny hubcaps goes on. And for those of you who are wondering about this impact gun, which I'm tightening the lug nuts with, it has 3 settings, 1, 2, 3, and the number 1 setting actually is right around 90 to 110 Newton meters when I've measured it, so that's perfect for these lug nuts. For those of you who are wondering, this is how it looks right now. I really like the style of that. So let's go ahead and bleed the power steering system when the car is on the ground and the engine is on. So I'm turning the steering wheel lock to lock a couple of times to bleed out any air in the system. As well as checking for any leaks of that bottom hose that I disconnected earlier. And with the car off, I check if I need to top off any fluid. And that's the power steering system done. Now all that's left is a test drive.
Well, first of all, the steering feels a lot better actually. I wasn't expecting that. The power steering feels a lot smoother. It doesn't make as much squeaking noises as it did before. Actually, no squeaking noises. The gearbox, straight away. The gears, yeah, you can feel a major difference. Reverse was pretty hard to get in before. So from a standstill, the gear linkage feels a lot better. And when you're driving, yeah, I mean, it's still a 30-year-old, 32-year-old gearbox, but you can definitely feel a noticeable difference after changing the transmission fluid. Sometimes you can feel a big difference. Sometimes the actual gearbox itself is worn out to the point that you just can't save it with a fluid change. But in this case, yeah, it feels a lot better for sure. Obviously, you should always check for leaks. Everything looks perfect. No leaks. So that's great. So that is it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. And once again, a major shout out to LMR
rabatt.se for hooking me up with the product in this video. They also have a discount code that I'll be dropping in the description down below, and also I will pin a comment. However, that discount code will only be for Swedish buyers. So yeah, keep that in mind. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.